Is it coming?
Department of Anthropology, Delhi University, and a former Vice Chancellor, Utkal University. So I request Prasi to give the memento. Prasi. Now I invite our colleague and now presently Director, Anthropological Survey of India, our Professor B.V. Sharma, sir, to occupy the chair. And now Prima Nandita will give the memento to Professor Sharma. Okay. So thank you. Led by our Vice Chancellor to light the lamp. No? Where is the Yeah, thanks. Thank you, sir. So now we are going to start our inaugural session. Now I would like to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Vijay Rao Sir, to chair this inaugural session and at the same time to give his presidential address for this 2 days post-World Congress. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. It's very exciting to be part of this Congress, especially after the main Congress is over, to be part of a satellite Congress. And I believe this Congress has come to India after a long lull. We must ensure, all of you must ensure, that the Congress comes to India more frequently. This is important. Let me first thank all the guests from outside the country. Some of them are sitting here, some are here. The President of the Congress is here, Professor Junji, and the conference chair, Somendra Mohan Patnaik ji is here, and our colleague, Professor B.V. Sharma Garu is here. He is briefly out of university. And Professor Haripriya Narasimhanji and Jyotishmay Sharma ji, our dean, and our own anthropology expert, Ramesh Singh ji is here. So really want to formally welcome all of you to University of Hyderabad campus as well as to this Congress. When I looked at the title of this satellite Congress, I was taken aback. And the title that was given to me as the satellite title is the Digital Anthropology. And that really struck me very hard. Because anthropology per se is a very exciting, dynamic subject. It's all about us. It's all about us, putting us in the context from its long past, perhaps to the future. And it is in this context, digital anthropology makes a very interesting twist. There is a twist in the tail here. Typically, when we read about anthropology, as students, as young scholars, We were beyond your control, because you are controlled by not by your natural intelligence, much more so by your artificial intelligence. Your gadgets control you, your machines control you, your navigation controls you. People know where you are, what you are doing, what you are buying. You know, you can snoop on others equally well if you want to. So it's a different world altogether in terms of how we network with each other. The real classical style of networking in anthropology was real human bonding. And that real human bonding is now replaced by this unreal and somewhat scary connectivity, where you are connected by everybody but you are not connected with anyone. So you are in that world where you look at yourself as actually a loner, but you have a lot of friends, social media friends. You have the surplus of luxury, of plenty, but you have nobody in real sense. So I think it's a very interesting area of opposites. I do not know how the theoretical framework on this digital anthropology evolves, whether one could even set up a theory. Because real human bonding can be theorized. Because real human behavior is somewhat predictable. But digital human behavior is not predictable.
Now
As the School of Social Sciences enters its Golden Jubilee year in 2024, it is only appropriate that this all-important post-Congress session around the theme of anthropology and digital cultures, helmed by the Department of Anthropology, is here to provide a grand prelude to a year of intellectual celebrations for the School of Social Sciences. Once again, a very warm welcome to you all for being here this afternoon. Thank you.
thank you, sir, for your beautiful words about our department and the school. And thank you once again, sir. Now I request Professor Junji Kojimi, President of IUAES and Osaka, Professor of Emeritus, Osaka University, Japan. Say a few words. Thank you.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Rao, Dean Professor Sharma, Professor V.B. Sharma of the Department of Anthropology, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm so pleased and honored to be here in Hyderabad and to be able to attend the inauguration of this conference at the University of Hyderabad. This is a post-Congress event of the 19th IUAES WAU World Anthropology Congress 2023 in Delhi, which was organized by Professor Somendra Patnaik of the University of Delhi. The last World Anthropology Congress in India was held nearly or in 1978. Now in 19, I'm sorry, now in 2023, a splendid main Congress of the World Anthropological Congress has just been completed in Delhi with the greatest success, thanks for Professor Patnaik, tremendous contributions. Plus, the technology and the facets of the human expect from these so rapid and ongoing change. But at least we can try to study scientific in the digital age. Together with all those who participate today, I look forward to the results and the products of this conference, and we will be able to think about what are happening, how our realities and our lives are being affected by digitalization, and how digitalization shape and change the way we think, do, and act with this new, almost unexpected and far-reaching transformative force. Thank you very much.
For your words. Now I request Professor S.M. Patnaik, sir, Vice President-elect, IUAES, to say a few words. Sir, thank you.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Rao, respected Dean Professor Sharma, President IUAES and Chair World Anthropology Union Professor Koizumi, Keynote Speaker Professor Daniel Miller, Guest of Honor Professor Sharma, Head Professor Singh, Vice President of IUAES Dr. Heather, Chair Council of Commissions Philippe, Director IGRMS Dr. Pandey, my esteemed colleagues from the prestigious University of Hyderabad and different parts of the world, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, I consider it as my privilege to be a part of this historic occasion when the University of Hyderabad is organizing 19th IUAES World Anthropology Post-Congress on a theme so relevant to the contemporary world. IUAES and WAU are the premier bodies of professional anthropologists in the world, and their coming to India marks a recognition of anthropological contribution by India to the global platform. University of Delhi was the host of the main event, and University of Hyderabad is the host of the post-Congress. Both the premier universities hosting it is also symbolic, to which I will return in the later part of my speech. The theme, marginalities, uncertainties, and world anthropologies, enlivening the past and envisioning the future, was conceived during the period of crisis, the pandemic, which shook the world at its core. And this theme received overwhelming response from all over the world, held in multiple modes, on-site, online, and hybrid mode. This Congress witnessed over 1,000 paper presentations spread over 160 panels, 14 roundtables, 8 workshops, and 44 panels online. 5 days of cultural extravaganza was carried out to showcase the cultural richness and diversity of Indian subcontinent, along with 2 other G20 nations, Brazil and Japan. I would like to emphasize that performances, dialogues, and deliberations around culture and community living constituted the possibilities for future collaboration beyond the disciplinary boundaries. The present Congress, the post-Congress, is on an important theme, and our Honorable Vice Chancellor has warned us by giving a metaphor of a bridge, that how digital technology is a possibility and it is also a danger. digital technology have become not just a part of our lives, but an extension of ourselves in an immersive and sensory way. Technology helps to re-establish tradition through the social network groups, as we all know, various social, regional, cultural, and ethnic setting. Here comes the challenge, that how these practices can be understood, both in real life and in digital world, relating to the broader social issues of such as control of labor, accumulation of capital, the organization of life worlds of the community members, and the globalization of cultural production. Time has come before all of us as a practitioners of the discipline to appreciate the challenges that technology and digitization poses to the theoretical and methodological understanding of the discipline. Now, the discipline has to keep its root, keep its gauge closer to the tradition, at the same time reinventing new possibilities of understanding the global opportunities. We are all standing here in Hyderabad, one of the premier cities of India.
I'm quite glad in the University of having, I would say, quality discussions about how should we organize, everything about the sessions, keynote address, valedictory address, everything. I don't know whether it is fortunate or unfortunate. I had to leave the university just a month before this is organized. I think we have taken more than 3 to 4 months to decide on the theme of this Congress. We had formally quite a few meetings in the department, at least 3, 4. Informally, almost every day under the tree at the tea shop, thinking what could be the topic that will fit to the department's work. Happy that we could finally decide on this particular topic, and I should also thank the senior colleagues who are sitting here, who are retired, and also those who would probably join the department in future for contributing quite a bit in deciding the concept, the theme that we wanted to organize. Well, when we were actually thinking about this theme, had many things in our minds. What to do, we just had COVID experience, we had good experiences of online teaching and pros and cons of this, and also rounds of discussions about the use of digital technologies during COVID time, after COVID time, and also the concepts that have emerged with this new things and all, like post-humanism and relating human beings to the others, and now many other things. Well, finally, we started writing the concept note. I don't want to really go into the details of how we conceive digital cultures and anthropology and digital culture, because that's already there in the concept note, which we have already circulated. It is there in the website, so there is no meaning in, again, reading out or even telling a few parts from it. But I think digital anthropology is something which can connect to every branch of anthropology, very relevant in the sense that we are conceiving everything in terms of some digital equipment these days. The way, after all, anthropology deals with human beings and how human beings interact to form social groups, social relations and social groups. And it is now a question of how these digital technologies are influencing our...
He got confirmation about holding the post-Congress here. Then he was working on conceiving the idea of digital culture and anthropology, and he gave so many titles, and he was, disturbing all of us, sending messages, and is it right to give this kind of title and all that. But finally, I still remember that my colleague Dr. Apparao and Professor Sharma has finalized this conceptual note, and they both were working towards this, and then suddenly, sir has to leave university for the better position, and then we were in little confusion, who will take over this. Then we had a faculty meeting, and then I requested my colleague, Dr. Alok, to be a convener and Dr. Srinivas to be co-convener for the seminar. Because since they are the one who involved with this process, and then somehow later on what happened is that, but after Samasar's exit also, he has been providing lots of support, inputs to all of us. And then unexpectedly, Dr. Alok and Dr. Srinivas has taken up so successfully. I see their dedication towards this organizing this seminar. But I was very reluctant to be a convener of this seminar because I was not so much involved, frankly speaking. And but Alok said that I think I should be there as a senior person. But please remember, I'm not there conducting lots of seminars on tribal issues and natural resource management, many other things. But this one, find it very unique, and I really find it very interesting. And I find, since I teach business anthropology, and I also find some of the relevance into this. And my basic idea of anthropology is that, I don't know, some of senior faculty members who are sitting here may not like it, but what I feel that the very definition of the anthropology says that it's a holistic study of mankind. And there's so much life is happening, extension activity of human life is happening in digital world. And if anthropology failed to venture into that area, then anthropology remain as a whole, not holistic. See, this is what my idea is all about. So I think our department has taken the good initiative of taking this topic for the national level Congress, and then now, there's so much deliberation is going to happen on different issues, which I have never imagined in my earlier career also. Because when you go through the program schedule, you'll come to know the different topics which are, I never thought of. Even today morning, we had a different experience of currency, digital currency we talk about. So these are some of unusual experience which you get. So I think all this credit goes to my co-organizer, Dr. Alok Pandey, Dr. Srinivas, and Professor Aparao for getting multi-dimension kind of perspectives in this common platform on this particular topic. And coming to the seminar, we have around 112 papers, which is spread across 22 panels in this 2 days' time. And so it has covered almost all the issues which are concerned with the digital world. So which will be very interesting, and hopefully I think we will be able to publish this document in some of the good platform. So this is what we are hoping for in the future. And I thank each one of you here who are participating, and surprisingly, I think I am very glad to be here today. Many of my teachers are here who taught me anthropology. And then another surprising package for me is Professor S.N. Rathasar is here, who has conducted my PhD viva. And that is also one interesting feature for me, and I thank all of you, and I hope you will have a nice time in these 2 days deliberations and a thoughtful engagement in the digital culture and anthropology. And I thank sir for giving this opportunity. Thank you once again. And now
with the permission of the chair,
so please.
May I invite Professor Junji Koizumi to formally present a book of abstract of the main Congress to Honorable Vice Chancellor.
Yes, yes.
The one which we did in Delhi. This was designed in this way only. I forgot to announce after my speech.
Because this will give you the flavor of what's going on.
And sir, I will also send you the soft copy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And now time has come for keynote address. Now I would request our friend Professor Haripriya to introduce the keynote speaker.
Should I start? Where is Professor? Can I start, sir? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Romesh Singh, and to Professor Sharma and the faculty at University of Hyderabad, Professor Patnaik, Professor Koizumi, and all the distinguished people gathered here, and to students and faculty of the department. Professor Daniel Miller, Professor of Anthropology at the University College London, UK, is, to use a cliche, a scholar who needs no introduction. Every student of anthropology and in many other social science disciplines start from his extraordinary work on material culture, consumption, and digital anthropology to understand the contemporary world and the role of anthropology in understanding it. So I will keep this introduction brief. I would like to focus on his work over the last 2 decades on digital anthropology. He founded the Digital Anthropology section of UCL and is currently the director of the Center for the Study of Digital Anthropology. Professor Miller has written or edited 41 books. His contribution to anthropology is huge. But just to give a flashback, borrowing a term widely used in Indian cinema, in 2001, Professor Miller and Don Slater wrote The Internet, an Ethnographic Approach, based on an ethnography of Internet use in Trinidad. This is the first publication to take a regional perspective on the impact of the Internet when everybody was looking at Internet as a global phenomenon, to look at it from a regional perspective, examining not just Internet provision and e-commerce, but also its impact on consumers, on relationships, on identity, on religion. The study brings the regional and national nature of Internet, not just the global. Another study in Jamaica in 2004 on the use of mobile phones challenged another commonly held notion that mobile phones are use. Professor Miller has just finished another mammoth project, the ASSA project, Anthropology of Smartphones and Smart Aging. This 5-year project at UCL employs a team of 10 anthropologists who work on a collaborative and comparative project, 16-month ethnographies. The project started in 2017-2018. With this, he has ventured also into medical anthropology, which has tried to develop an anthropological perspective to what is known as mHealth. This project investigates fundamental changes in people's relationship to age and health associated with the global rise of the smartphone. Again, I've used many of these books from the ESA project for my teaching. By making his project output open access, Professor Miller has also enabled anthropologists in developing nations get access to world-class research. On behalf of the IUAES and the WAU and the Department of Anthropology, University of Hyderabad, Department of Liberal Arts, IIT Hyderabad, and various institutions involved in this conference, I thank Professor Miller for giving his time to deliver the keynote. We look forward to hearing from him. Thank you.
Development of my PhD was based in an event called Tribal Societies. By contrast, over the last month, my main link to India has been watching the TV series Made in Heaven on Netflix about weddings amongst the middle and upper classes of Delhi and trying to source Fab India shirts, since I'm a bit addicted to Fab India shirts. Certainly, we studied weddings when conducting fieldwork in villages, and these could be impressive even then. But in retrospect, I realised that in that period, I was teaching hardly anything at all about urban India or the middle class. At that time, the LSE didn't teach about Europe because that wasn't anthropology, while the digital simply didn't exist. The problem is that there is a legacy to all of this, because even while anthropology may have changed, the popular perception of anthropology, who we are and what we do, is still very much linked to these earlier tendencies to focus on certain kinds of society and largely ignore others. And this is precisely what digital anthropology is ideally suited to challenge. So to achieve a rethinking of what anthropology could be, we need to deal with this legacy of the past. But in addition, we also need to imagine the future of anthropology. Because unusually, I see anthropology as, yes, under considerable threat, but also having the potential to be far more important in the future than it has ever been in the past. There are many reasons why anthropology might grow in future significance. Let me give 3 brief examples. First, the primary task of anthropology is empathy, and there has never been a greater need for empathy, an understanding of how the world looks from the perspective of people entirely different from ourselves, often people we don't agree with and don't like. Giving people a capacity for empathy ought to be central to the idea that a person can be considered properly educated. Secondly, we are unusual in that the method of ethnography is highly parochial, yet we have ambitions to talk about humanity as a whole. Now, why does this matter? The reason is that political divisions are shifting. It used to be principally an opposition between left as against right politics. But increasingly, it's a division between people who feel more comfortable in cosmopolitan worlds and those who feel they've been left behind or neglected by these liberal cosmopolitans. There's a growing disconnect between the global and the local. But that is exactly what anthropology as a discipline can address and help heal, as exemplified in the way that we show how a parochial local ethnography is part of a global world. Thirdly, the world is becoming more private, increasingly a place of nuclear families in apartment blocks. Only anthropology is prepared to enter into these intimate domains and learn about what matters most to people, their closest social relations, thanks to our commitment to long-term fieldwork and gaining people's trust. So there were 3, and there are many more reasons why anthropology could become ever more important in the future. But there are also many reasons why most people simply do not see even this potential in the discipline of anthropology. There are powerful forces that would wish to remove the discipline entirely. Dismiss it because of its colonial origins and its earlier focus that seemed to avoid modernity itself. Also, its epistemological differences from natural science, people who only think of data and describe our evidence as anecdotes. Ethnography may be seen as a research method incompatible with neoliberal ideas of privacy that we find in ethics committees that don't seem to see any public good in having public knowledge about what really matters to people. In summary, in the future, anthropology could grow extensively, but it could also disappear. This, for me, is the background for thinking about digital anthropology, because this is exactly the kind of terrain where people might think of us as redundant, but actually we can become the vanguard. The first battleground is ethnography itself. To continue our role in relation to empathy, privacy, humanism, and these other goals, we need to retain our commitment to long-term ethnography of around, say, 16 months. Yet with the digital, everything seems to be so fast-moving. One month it's TikTok, the next month it's Meta and virtual worlds, and the next month it's algorithms, and last month it was ChatGPT. The world assumes that this means we need faster, not slow methods. But I would argue that precisely because we are embedded in life as lived, we are the people who first see the consequences of these changes. In 2013, I blogged that Facebook was no longer popular amongst young people in places such as the UK. Both the BBC and The Economist wrote explicit refutations saying that I was wrong, that a single anthropologist could not generalize from the village in England where I was at the time conducting fieldwork. Facebook was surely too powerful to lose its most important target group, the young. But 10 years later, it is clear I was not wrong. We can be in the vanguard of knowledge as anthropologists because we are often the first to know what's going on. While other followers of digital tech are constantly speculating about, what the next technology will be and what it will do, anthropologists are already embedded within populations and able to observe the actual consequences of these technologies for people as they are occurring. In 2021, the team of anthropologists I worked with published a book called The Global Smartphone. In this, we radically rethink what a smartphone is. The smartphone is right in front of our nose. Everyone can see it or study it. Yet I honestly believe that our book is years ahead of others in understanding perhaps the single most important digital technology in terms of its consequences for our everyday lives. We start by arguing that the smartphone is neither a phone nor dominated by this acronym SMART, which stands for devices that learn from their usage. We argue that we need to rethink the smartphone from a completely different perspective. We call it the transportal home. That is first and foremost a place within which we now live. Obviously different from a bricks and mortar home, but there are many analogies. It is our best address if people want to contact us. It is the place where we may do our research and other kinds of work. The place where we might watch our entertainment, the place where we organize our calendars and lives, the place where we meet other people for a chat, and now also often the place where we do our shopping and banking without leaving this home. From this starting point of the smartphone as a place within which we live, we go on to develop many other original, theoretical and analytical points about what the smartphone is. We examine the implications of its constant presence through what we call perpetual opportunism. We show how it brings back the extended family, how it operates as an unprecedented prosthetic that we call beyond anthropomorphism, and so forth. As far as I am aware, no other discipline has tried to reconceptualize smartphones in this and acknowledge its radical differences from any prior technology to anything like the same degree. So yes, we would claim to be the vanguard discipline, the first people to understand something, even though every member of this team spent the full 16 months carrying out their ethnography and a year in analysing their findings before we could develop these radical new ideas about the smartphone. Our complete rethinking of smartphones was not despite the ethnographic method, but was possible because we are ethnographers. We have the holistic sensibility that allows us to see the hundreds of things the smartphone now does within everyday life and observe the consequences. Because what matters about the smartphone for us is not the technology itself. It is, above all, its consequences for people. That, for us, is what a smartphone is. But I am using this to make a much bigger point. that showing how anthropology can tell us so much more about what a smartphone is can be the vehicle we use for telling people around the world what anthropology is. That is why digital anthropology has potentially a very special place within the contemporary discipline. So how can we broaden this from my example of the smartphone to consider the possibilities for a region as extensive as, say, India? Now, I don't propose to discuss the situation in India directly, although if you want an example of our work, there is the book by Sriram Venkatraman on the Chennai region, and his book, alongside our general book, How the World Changed Social Media, is available for free in English, Hindi, and Tamil. Instead, I'm going to make my point through a comparison with the only other country in the world that has a similar size population. Currently, I am jointly editing a book about digital anthropology in China, and I want to suggest that perhaps this might provide ideas for a comparable initiative, also maybe in India in the future and other regions participating in this World Congress. There are, I feel, many similarities in terms of the threats to anthropology and also the possibilities. In China also, anthropology has a legacy that focus mainly on rural areas and minority ethnic populations. For many in China, this remains how they understand the discipline. Currently, it is dominated by more successful disciplines, such as sociology and communication studies. And quite often, anthropologists are just used by sociologists to do a little bit of ethnography as part of an applied policy-driven project. I get constant requests to supervise PhDs from China, but hardly any of them have the training in anthropology we require. So, alongside the students that I have worked with, we want to radically change the perception of anthropology itself as a discipline. And the way we want to achieve this is precisely through digital anthropology. Because in China, as I think increasingly in India or Indonesia, much of Africa and many other regions, there is the feeling that the future will be secured through leapfrogging other economies by a focus on leading IT and other digital technologies. This often dominates the rhetoric of governments who naturally want to claim that they too represent the future aspirations of the nation. With all this in mind, the task of our book is to demonstrate that only anthropology can provide the insights that are required right now. We listen to the data analytical sciences who say they are drowning in data but don't know how to interpret it. We listen to the political and legal bodies that say they're supposed to regulate new technologies, but they can't keep up with what these technologies are doing to their populations. Our point is that we are there and we have a breadth and depth of knowledge that no one else has. So, let me briefly survey the topics that we'll be covering in this book. Some of the chapters are concerned to show that we are the only people that can really gain a sense of everyday and intimate life. One of the research projects has been about women's use of period tracking apps. Not just the impact on the lives of women, but also a study of the companies that make and promote these apps. Now, understanding period tracking apps means understanding feelings about blood and sex at a level most people are actually quite reluctant to talk about, but which are hugely important. Another way digital media has become part of intimate life is exemplified by social media. Think of the way WhatsApp permeates close family relations. So another of our examples looks at the range of social media and the way this expresses the normative, the everyday moralities, and the sense of basic values in a small town. Next, we have chapters that show the way digital technologies shift the relationship between economy and society. In one case, how low income and low status women are starting to develop small scale businesses through selling to their friends and relatives. But equally, a chapter that looks how social media and live streaming decontextualize economic activity, potentially destroying traditional markets and decontextualizing economic transactions from their traditional social roots, so the opposite trends. Then we have chapters that show how people use digital technologies within various forms of encompassing authority. This can include the complex relationship between smartphone use and schools within the education system, similar to topics discussed by Sriram Venkatraman in his book about social media in South India. But also, how do media companies deal with the various forms of platformization in the context of also having to respect the constraints and expectations of often authoritarian states? While most of our work is focused on the impact of digital technologies on everyday life and ordinary people, we also need to show that we can be crucial to understanding the digital companies and institutions. One of the authors worked as an intern in a Chinese company, one you all have heard of, but I can't name, but a company that creates the kind of algorithms that people have become so concerned about in recent times. But she shows that the reality of this company is full of the sort of contradictions and complexities that people are well aware of if they ever work inside business organizations, but which are much less well known to people who just hear about corporations from the outside. Indeed, I think some of the most important recent work in digital anthropology over the last few years has been demolishing this rather simplistic way people imagine the lives of data inside big corporations. For example, Nick Siever's work on music recommendation systems. Then there's also Klaus Hoyer's work on data paradoxes in the Danish health system. Both excellent studies. In our book, they're matched by another paper on the contradictions found when examining digital technologies in the health sector in China. So we're writing this book right now, and it will be quite a while before it emerges as a publication. If you want to gain a better sense of digital anthropology in China that is already out there, you could look at the two books by my co-editor, Xinyuan Wang, because I think they're really strong exemplifications of what digital anthropology can achieve. Also, as with all our books, they're open access for UCL Press. Older people have embraced and had their lives changed by smartphones can only be achieved in the light of the same people's much earlier experience during the Chinese Cultural Revolution that dominated their youth. I've dwelt for some time on the case of China because in terms of scale and many other factors, there are similarities, I think, to the situation in India and some other regions with respect to the possibilities and future of anthropology. I acknowledge that there are also many differences. For example, much of the best-known digital anthropology in India concerns people who work for international companies outside of it almost every day, partly because anxiety about new technology helps to sell newspapers. Now, some of this is rubbish. The empirical evidence is firmly against the idea that digital media creates filter bubbles, while some of it is indeed deeply concerning, such as the potential of surveillance technologies. But my concern is the overall impact, the lack of balance, because it makes people seem like the passive victims, and all agency is viewed as coming from above. I've already referred to our ethnographic work inside corporations, and this reveals very different pictures. But I often start my lectures here at UCL with a discussion of Mark Zuckerberg. Some of you may remember that film, The Social Network. What Mark Zuckerberg actually did was create software for young men to rate babes in Harvard. Others saw a wider potential, which he then followed. But Mark Zuckerberg tried to make sure that this was not used outside of Harvard. And then later, he tried to stop Facebook being used outside of the universities, and he failed in both. So much for foresight. Things haven't changed much. Over the last couple of years, Meta has lost between $30 and $100 billion by betting on Meta, that is mainly VR. Loads of other IT companies assumed that he knew stuff, and they hired extra staff on the same basis. Many of these staff, some of whom I know personally, have lost their jobs because that Meta hasn't, at least as yet, happened. But the amazing thing is that Meta, the company, already had VR goggles. They had Oculus. And I have to say, I know hardly anyone who still used Oculus 3 months after they purchased the thing. So if Mark Zuckerberg couldn't even do interesting things with the VR system he already had, why on earth would he bet so much on VR? Clearly, some very clever people have monetarized Facebook and Instagram very successfully. But Mark Zuckerberg, the genius visionary that people imagine, no, not really. We live in a world where all the emphasis is on what technology is doing to us, and very little to balance this on what we are doing to technology. The exception, of course, being anthropology, and therefore in response, I believe we have a major role to play. Because in our work, we see something totally different. Not a passive population that is simply the recipient of these technologies, but a very active population who are the ones who in many respects create these technologies. That was why our book was not called How Social Media Changed the World, but called How the World Changed Social Media. As an example, let's return to the smartphone. Who actually puts the smart into smartphones? My son is a software engineer, and I don't want to disparage the brilliance that lay behind the creation of the first iPhone or the latest AI. But part of that brilliance, at least with smartphones, lay in seeding power to the user. What is so different about the smartphone compared to any prior technology is its built-in malleability. No one just buys and uses a smartphone. As soon as they get the thing, they transform it. They delete apps, they add apps, they change settings, and then they start creating content. And bit by bit, the phone becomes ever more their phone. Indeed, what's been so instructive in our ethnographic projects is how much you can learn about the person from learning about their phone. Not just even as an individual. The phone teaches you about couples, families, and wider cultural values. To a large extent, it is they who have created their phone. In our most recent project, called The Anthropology of Smartphones and Smart Aging, we focused mainly on older people. Now, even if others are prepared to regard the young as creative, it tends to be older people who are usually seen as the best examples of populations as passive victims of these technologies. Most of my team ran classes to teach smartphone use to older people, so we could directly observe their struggles with learning how to use them. we could also map the development of an age-based digital divide, as other services, such as phone customer support, were subsequently reduced. But in another edited volume that is currently in press, we concentrate on the area of health. Now, it's hard to generalize across 9 different countries, which is what we're working in. But in general, we found that health is a field where currently so many companies and states are trying to develop specific bespoke health apps as contributions to people's welfare. But what we observed is that older people in particular are highly resistant to using these bespoke apps. They really don't want a proliferation of apps on their phones. Yet, this did not mean that they were using their phones less for health than we expected. If anything, they were using these phones even more for health than we expected. And this could be explained by other observations. That older people in several regions had become very creative and ingenious in finding ways to turn apps that were not originally designed for health purposes into health apps. One of the most important health apps today is surely WhatsApp. In fact, we published a 150-page manual on how people in Brazil use WhatsApp for health. But none of this reflects our ideas. It's all based on what the ethnographer observed people doing with WhatsApp as a means of getting information about health, linking to health authorities and insurance companies, finding out about symptoms and side effects, and then sharing knowledge and also various kinds of misinformation, often using visual and other components within the app and so forth. So the people who are seen as least likely to be the active agents in creating the smartphone actually turn out to be highly resourceful and inventive when it comes to something older people really do care about, which is their health. This has led us to develop, using a phrase taken from Katrin Pieper, the idea of smart from below. That actually the people who make the smartphone smart in terms of its capacity to actually be deployed in 100 different ways during the day is us. Obviously, this depends on the perspicacity of those software engineers who created a device that is open to such extensive change and redeployment. But we have availed ourselves of these possibilities, at least for people at a sufficiently high income and educational level. This final example brings us back to the primary aims of anthropology as a discipline, showing how people put the smart into smartphones is classic anthropology. It depends on empathy, seeing the smartphone from the perspective of the people we study, an understanding mainly not derived from interviewing and asking them questions, because most people retain this sort of negative anti-smartphone discourse. It's rather from using traditional participant observation to see what people actually do with their smartphones. Such studies express our empathy and our humanism, respecting the uniqueness of each person's smartphone. It also brings out our more general mission to retain respect for human agency that is missing from the way other disciplines tend to think about and write about digital technologies. It shows our capacity for defining technologies in terms of their consequences, not just their affordances. Here at University College London, digital anthropology is thriving. We have people working on the anthropology of data science, on how to rethink the way people conceptualize climate change in the digital age, on political resistance through humor and memes, are new forms of multimodal anthropology that no longer relies just on text, but as in our book series, includes films and infographs and other media to disseminate our findings. We were obviously gratified when our book series for the Why We Post project passed 1 million downloads. But that does reflect the way we think of the digital, not just as something we study, but something we can also use as anthropologists. A couple of months ago, I launched a game. You can download it on your phones. It's called Trini, T-R-I-N-I, Trini Food Quiz. I designed it with a colleague in Trinidad, an anthropologist, to help people in Trinidad think about the relationship between diet and hypertension. We developed this game entirely based on our fieldwork in Trinidad, and especially what we learned from a study of anti-vaccination sentiment during COVID. We used this to think that we needed completely different ways of trying to convey issues about health to populations that they might actually accept. In short, if we can learn about other people's use of digital technologies, maybe we can also be in the vanguard of using digital technologies ourselves. To conclude, it's easy to get very excited about digital anthropology. It's an incredibly dynamic and enthralling topic. But what I have tried to suggest today is that actually what we really want to do with digital anthropology is to get people very excited about anthropology. First, thank you for this kind invitation. My aim
for your insightful lecture, and you would like to take some few questions. Professor Miller, can you hear me?
Hello. Actually, the camera is pointed to the audience, not to the platform, so I'm not hearing very well. Is it possible to... Sorry, could you speak again? Well, wherever the microphone is, I just couldn't hear people. Sorry.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Would you like to take some few questions from the audience?
Certainly. I'd be happy to.
Would you like to take some few questions from the audience?
Yes, could you hear me?
No, you would like to take some few questions, sir.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm happy to answer some questions.
Oh. So if you have any questions from the audience, I think you can. So no questions, huh?
Please stop using Wi-Fi for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Zakir Hussain Wi-Fi. Okay.
Zakir Hussain. If there's no questions, then yeah. So yes, either has some questions. No, you have some questions.
Thank you, Professor Miller. I don't know if you can see me. Oh, I have to come to the front. Oh, dear. Oh, somebody else. Okay, all right. I'm fine. I'm fine where I am. Well, thank you very much for that lecture. That was just brilliant. Thank you. So, you also hinted in your keynote address about the importance of history in understanding the use of technology. How important do you think it is for anthropologists to also look at the evolution of technology, the history of it? Because that is sometimes that is kind of missed, I feel, in the curriculum.
Thank you very much for your question. The way I think an anthropologist is perhaps different from a regular historian is that we are interested in historical background essentially as a kind of legacy. And we're interested in it because it actually has an impact on what we see around us today. And as I suggested in my talk, this is often regional. So if we wanted to understand how a new set of digital technologies are being used in a particular region, we need to understand how in the longer term things have developed in that region. So for example, Tenon has worked in a village, I think it was in Bengal, over a very long period of time. Looked first at things like how family relations operate, which conventional anthropology would do. So we have to understand the nature of extended families, we have to understand gender relations and so forth. Then you start to see the very first kind of mobile phones coming in, and you say, well, how does this then change, for example, the nature of extended families? Now, in a different area that I've been working in, we find that actually traditionally there may have been an extended family, but people had become increasingly nuclear families, as I mentioned, living in, for example, apartment blocks. But when they saw the capacity of these digital technologies, what they realized was actually WhatsApp's great for bringing back extended families, because your cousins, your aunties, your uncles, etc., can communicate on WhatsApp even if you're now living in very different regions. So what you see there is you're looking at two histories together. You're looking at the history of social relations, for example, the shift from living in rural areas maybe to apartment blocks, and you're looking at technological history from pre-digital through to mobile phones, through to smartphones. And I think that's the way the anthropologists can pay regard to your question, by actually having an anthropological way of thinking about history and then using that to understand and explain the way the digital technologies are being used as they observe them in their ethnographies.
Thank you, Professor Miller. I am Professor Siva Prasad, former professor from the Department of Anthropology. It's a wonderful keynote address. But when we are looking at digital technology, we are positioning ourselves among those who possess the digital technologies. But there are a large majority of the population, especially in the the indigenous communities and others, or poorer communities, they use it for a kind of a purpose. Like, for example, they are used as a control. Like, the labor are the ones they look for jobs, they are given. So there are, when we are studying that, are we not looking at how the digital technology is bringing in new kinds of inequalities amongst the population? How do we reflect on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think that after working with digital technologies for a very long time, there is one generalization you can make, which is that in almost every area, there will be simultaneous positive and negative effects. So in respect to quality, there are simultaneous equalizations and new forms of what we call digital divide, which is inequalities. So at the same time, people who were relatively low income and actually were cut off from maybe couldn't have bought, let's say, a computer. Clearly, if you do end up with a very cheap Reliance phone, you're able to access technologies that previously only wealthier people could have. And that would be an example of equalization. But at exactly the same time, if you find things like government and corporations are expecting everybody to be online, and now you can't actually contact a human being if you have a complaint or a problem, and you don't necessarily have access to those technologies, then that creates a greater inequality and exacerbates inequalities you already had. So it's a very complex and contradictory question. If you look, for example, at Raman Katraman's work, in Tamil Nadu, a lot of the people he worked, or some of the people he worked with, were not literate. They could not read or write, but they were certainly using phones because there were certain things they could do through visual material available in phones that they hadn't previously been able to do. So again, they developed new capacities, but they also are not, because they are not literate, they're also being left behind by some of those new capacities. And I think it's very important in digital anthropology not to simplify it, not to say, oh, it's good, oh, it's bad. That's what newspapers will do and other people will do. We have to confront the actual complexity and contradictions as these things develop, wherever they are, in wealthy societies, low-income societies, marginalized societies, etc. Because almost invariably, you will find this simultaneity of the consequences. That there are some we would regard as positive, and equally some we would regard as negative, and come as two sides of the same coin.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I'm a master student here. When we talk about the digital world, we have a powerful country like China that already has a sort of a social credit system. And what are your insights into how such a system affects the lives of the daily people, and how do you see the future for such a system as globally speaking, sir?
Yeah. I mean, the social credit system in China is a very important example to focus on, so thank you for the question. And it's interesting that it is seen very differently, I think, from outside of China and from inside of China. From outside of China, it's generally been regarded as the, if you like, the most extreme case of a very authoritarian state. In other words, if you don't know it, the social credit system means that you could very easily be observed. And if you do anything that is regarded as antisocial, whatever it may be, you may be stopped from buying train tickets or plane tickets, or in other ways excluded. So clearly it has related to our concerns about new surveillance technology, the way governments then apply these new surveillance technologies, and the results can be constraints to the ordinary citizen. That's how it's generally seen outside of China. The anthropologists who I work with, who work from inside of China, find, maybe they're surprised, that most people in China actually don't necessarily see it that way. They actually are worried about things like corruption, fraud, all sorts of ways they may otherwise be exploited. And they see this in some ways as a safeguard that actually helps identify and deal with problems which rise with the sort of difficulty of things like trust within economic systems. Now, I would think that as anthropologists, we are, I mean, in the sense that I said in the last question, we should start basically by suspending our judgments. We should not just be using this to say, this is good, this is bad. What we're interested in is that it turns out, as in the last question, to be far more complex. This system is seen by different people in different ways, and obviously it relates partly to the way we understand the perspectives of populations and also governments of states. But one thing is clear is that this kind of phenomena is important, and we should be anxious about it. We should be concerned with what people can do with these new technologies as corporations and states, etc. We also need not to simply project our own view onto it. We also have to take into account what do the people of that particular population, how do they see it? What's their attitude? And how do they describe it? What is it for them? And that, to me, has always been the role of anthropology, to actually, not say it's my opinion about it as an outsider, but to actually be empathetic and say, well, how do the people that we work with perceive of that system? And that, I think, has been the main contribution so far of anthropologists to understanding the Chinese social credit system.
Thank you, Professor Miller, for your wonderful lecture. And since there's lack of time, I think we would request the participants, if there's any question, I think would you accept if they send email to you?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you so much. Sir. Yeah. So now, Blick for his wonderful lecture. I think thank you so much for giving your time. Yeah. And now I request Professor Junji ji and S.M. Patnaik sir and Professor V.V. Sharma to inaugurate our conference abstract, sir, which is there. Then it will be followed by the vote of thanks by Dr. Alok Kumar Pandey. Sinu, please bring it here. He's locked out. Yeah, he's locked out.
Professor?
No, he's
Professor Miller?
No, he's locked out.
He's locked out.
Yes, I am still here.
Professor Miller,
just
we
telling
would like to thank you. So just hang on if you have time.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind this. Now I request my colleague Dr. Alok Kumar Pandey to offer a vote of thanks for this one.
Okay. Good evening, all of you. It's an honor to present the vote of thanks for this very important inaugural session. First of all, I would like to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor for inaugurating the 19th IUAES WAU Post-Congress and for his message and coming here to inaugurate the session. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. I thank Professor Jyotirmay Sharma, the Dean of School of Social Sciences, for introducing the school and recognizing the important contribution of the Department of Anthropology and all his support in putting this post-Congress together. I thank Professor Junji and Professor Patnaik as part of IUAES for accepting our proposal to host the 19th post-Congress by the Department of Anthropology. Thank you, Professor Junji, and thank you, Professor Patnaik. I next thank our own Professor B.V. Sharma for his for initiating this idea of organizing the post-Congress and his support by being there and later moving on to ANSI Kolkata and also guiding us from there. Thank you, sir. I thank Professor Haripriya Narasimhan, Department of Liberal Arts, the IIT Hyderabad, for introducing the keynote address speaker, Professor Daniel Miller. Ma'am, thank you for that. I mean, this session would not be possible without the keynote speaker. I personally thank, and on the behalf of the Department of Anthropology and the University of Hyderabad, I thank the trailblazer, Professor Miller, in the field of digital anthropology for his keynote address, without which the post-Congress will not find meaning. He has highlighted the significance of anthropology in interrogating the digital space and the continued relevance of anthropology in a digital and a digitized world. Of course, I liked the very idea that you have not abandoned what our anthropological ancestors have given us, that is ethnography and fieldwork, and you have reinstated that in this keynote address, that we cannot do away with ethnography and fieldwork, and instant work is not going to take us anywhere. We have to do intensive as well as extensive ethnographic work. Thank you, Professor Miller. I think that is my takeaway from this as a young anthropologist teaching young students, and I'll reinstate that in my classrooms as well, apart from all your work in the digital space. A big thank you to you for joining us in spite of the time difference and the technical difficulties. Really, from my heart, thanks a lot for this lovely keynote address. Thank you, Professor Miller.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been
Thank you. I would like to thank our funding bodies who have made this post-Congress in whatever shape it's taken. First and foremost is our own institution of eminence, this IOE, which has funded this post-Congress. And then the TCRTI, which is Ministry of Tribal Welfare, the Department of Tribal Welfare, Government of Telangana, and the Anthropological Survey of India. These three institutions have been instrumental in funding this post-Congress. I thank the three institutions. I thank our academic and organizing collaborators, which is IIT Hyderabad, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, the Council for Social Development Hyderabad, the Center for Economic and Social Sciences, the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, the TCRTI, and ANSI for collaborating in making this event possible. There are certain particular individuals in these institutions who have been our backbone and helping us throughout by counseling, by extending their infrastructure and academic support. First and foremost, I like to thank Professor Haripriya Narasimhan from IIT Hyderabad for, it's not too much, for getting Professor Miller to deliver the keynote address. Without you, this would not have been possible. Thank you. And I thank Professor Shubha Ranganathan too for helping us in the whole process of putting all this together. Professor Mohammed from Maulana Azad National Urdu University, I don't see him here, but thank you, sir, for taking care of the accommodation and the academic arrangements. I thank Professor Sujit Mishra from CSD, Professor Asim Prakash from TISS, and Professor Revati, who's the director of CES, for helping us in this academic activity. I mean, I would fail if I do not thank all the conveners and the co-conveners and the chairpersons of all the panels who have come from far and near, who have put up panels, and last but not the least, the delegates who have come from far as well, who are offline and online in participating in this conference. Thank you. So I thank all of you, and I thank the Registrar, University of Hyderabad, and the AR Estate section for providing this space. Though we are paying them, but still they agreed that you can use the space on payment. So we thank them for the space. Thank you. Lastly, I thank all my colleagues in the department. I'm not going to take this, but as colleagues we work together, who have really tirelessly you heard Professor Sharma saying that this is going on. We have been, agitating, for maybe months and months to see that this is happening. So I thank my colleagues, and without, and I mean it, without the students in various committees, this is not possible. So I thank all the students, and I can't take names, but from deep down, from my heart, I thank all of you for working day in and day out in making this post-Congress materialize. Thank you all. Well, I'm done with the thank you. It's not just a ritual, but I mean it from my heart. There is a tea break now, but I would like to remind all of you that there is a session after the tea break. So please don't disperse. Please come back after the tea break and join. Thank you, Professor Miller. He's left, and see you after tea. Thank you.